Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Looking forward.
Thank you. Our listeners are thrilled to have you on, as I am. And those that are newly acquainted with you are going to be excited to hear what you have to share. So we are here today to talk about your new book. Well, it's from a year ago, right? You published it a year ago. And
Yep.
now you've done all kinds of trainings on it. And I know there's a workbook. And it's called The Unshakable Woman, 4 Steps to Rebuilding Your Body, Mind, and Life After a Life Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Give our listeners a little background as to how this book came about.
Sure. Well, I've been in health and mindset and personal development for 27 years. And it started with my own health crash. And it's always like we teach what we need to learn. So I was a dietitian, master's in nutrition, personal trainer, and I should have been the picture of health. And it didn't make any bit of sense because I was eating well, I was exercising, and I got so sick I couldn't get out of bed. You name it, I had it. And I had a feeling it had something to do with my toxic relationships, emotional overwhelm, chronic stress. So I had surgery. And at the time, I also had a husband and a home and 4 kids and only 4 dogs. Back then, we have 6 now. And I had a feeling it had to do with those things. So while I healed, I studied to become a whole health coach, a health expert trained to teach how your lifestyle creates health or wellness, illness and disease, and also a functional diagnostic nutritionist, testing for stress-related issues. And I changed everything and everything healed. And I had been through some life crises myself, physical and mental and emotional. And the book just flew out of me because I just felt like, wow, it really is this integration of health and mindset and all of these other things that helped me heal. And I just couldn't wait to share it.
Well, I found it amazing. I got so much from it, and I keep going back over it. And I have a lot of work to do yet, but I am really glad. Right? I'm so glad that I discovered this book, and there's so many things in it, the exercises and practical things that you can do and steps to change your beliefs and transform yourself. And you said something interesting in that book about people save time by thinking instead of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to talk about that.
You know, we're so busy, and the only way we have the time we need to get everything done is we wouldn't dare take that time off of somebody else. So we cut some corners, and we cut those corners when it comes to ourselves. And we cut it by giving up sleep, right? I mean, think about it. If I wake up a little bit earlier, I can knock out a few more emails. If I go to the drive-through, I don't have to cook that healthy meal at home. And one of the other things we do is we turn down the feeling and turn up the doing. We turn down the being and turn down the feeling. And what that really means is we become almost machine-like in order to get things done. And in doing so, it's not that the other things go away. There's like this little voice that is, there's something that we need to do or pay attention to, but we don't want to take the time for it because feelings, and they take time to process, and we don't have the luxury of that. So we turn it down until we can't.
Yeah, which means a crash.
It does. But we'll try to numb and distract ourselves as long as we can. I mean, that's exactly what my TEDx talk was about, where we use things like food and drugs and alcohol and work and TV and keeping busy, all of these modalities, all of these choices, techniques to sort of, numb and distract ourselves from hearing that voice. But what happens is the voice gets louder and louder. So the stakes get bigger and bigger. So if it used to take 1 drink, it takes 2. If it used to take 2 cookies, it takes 4. If it used to take 1 show, now you're binge watching a whole series. And that voice, and we automatically assume it's something negative. Like, it's going to create this entire shakeup that's going to destroy everything around us. It may cause a shakeup, but it's not always necessarily bad. I really equate this to, when let's say a child, they have a favorite blue shirt. That blue shirt doesn't become bad, but they've outgrown it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with us. There are certain things, what used to work doesn't work anymore. What used to feel good doesn't feel good anymore. What used to make sense doesn't make sense anymore. And that's what that voice is trying to show us.
It's interesting that you say that we can build up our tolerance and raise our tolerance to distractions even things outside of substances. So whatever that distraction is, we need more and more of it to stay numb. That is a very interesting point. Now,
it's so true. And I see this all the time. And, you know, we don't even realize we're doing this.
yeah.
But we're desperately trying to escape ourselves, because the minute we have the luxury to stop and really think and feel and ask ourselves what's going on, it can create this cascade of events. So we'd rather avoid it.
And that's interesting, because that probably explains why some people, you hear about people trying to use geographical cures when their life isn't working out. Oh, I'll move here. I'll go to the Bahamas. I'll go live in Puerto Rico. Wherever I'm going is going to fix me. Mm-hmm. But wherever you go, there you are.
You take yourself with you wherever you go. So you can, you know, it's a wonderful thing if all is well, but if not, it's just so helpful to take a look and see what it is. And, yes. You know, and that's where, and I know you wanted to talk about those questions, but that's where those questions really come in handy, because I'm a big proponent of, you know, you can't change what you're not aware of. So as scary as it may be to find out what's at the root of it, at least you know what you're working with. I mean, I had a client in here the other day, and she said, we hit on some big stuff. And she said, you know what? And I saw fear. She goes, I'm not ready to look at that yet. And that's okay. But at least, you know, that's the reason why you're keeping that weight on. That's the reason why that disease is still there. And I know that sounds full-blown crazy if I haven't seen that 100 times, where you would think, well, it's a no-brainer. Someone wants to rid themselves of that condition or the weight. But the truth is, if you haven't figured out who you could be without it, it's not going anywhere.
Well, and the interesting thing that you mentioned too, it really is the baby steps in there. Is not mm-hmm. so much that she is unaware or she's aware and boom, now it's fixed. Mm-hmm. But she then has the freedom even to say to you, now I'm aware of this, and still I'm going to take some time and decide when I want to approach it. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. there's in-between steps there.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be so huge. You know, if you at least recognize and acknowledge that big block, now you have a choice. You can avoid it completely, or you could just start chipping away at it. You know, I've found that one of three things happen. We either confront it when we're ready to deal with it, when we're ready to look. One of three things. We either look at it squarely and we make peace with it. And I write about that in the workbook. Like, let's say, for example, you hate your job. Let's say you hate it, and every day you come home and you binge. And you say, you know what, I see what I'm doing. Let me just take a look at this. And then you say, you know what, my job, and we have the benefits. I like dress down Fridays. It's convenient. I'm good with it until, you know, I'll reevaluate this a year from now. Mm-hmm. You may actually have a renewed appreciation for your job, because now you see all it offers you. There goes the need to binge. It's over. But there are two other things that can happen too.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
Tell me.
So that's I call it the self-induced life crisis.
Yes, I want to hear about this.
Yeah. This is all about decision. You know, this is the day where you throw out the cookies, you make the doctor's appointment, you join the gym, you have that conversation, you pack your bags, whatever it is, it's that day. And mm-hmm. everybody listening, if they've experienced that day, you never forget it. There is this resolve. And you're yes. not the same. You're just not. And that's where that is such a beautiful place to start transformation, because, you know, I always think about the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't just stick on a pair of wings and become the butterfly, right? Think about what goes on. This caterpillar on a random Tuesday says, I'm just so done. I'm just done with this whole caterpillar life. I'm just not doing it anymore. And it stops eating, latches onto a branch, you know, spins a cocoon around itself. Think of the symbolism of this. Dies to the life that it's known, is willing to be deconstructed, emulsified, unrecognizable from anything it ever was. And only because it was willing to go through that, does it get to become the butterfly. That's transformation. It's messy, it's ugly, it's not pretty, but you transform.
Yes, you do. And you define 4 major categories that we need to improve upon in our lives to climb beyond trauma and crisis. Mm-hmm. What are the categories, and why do they need, or why do you recommend that they're addressed in a specific order?
They're not necessarily in a specific order.
Okay.
But these are, I've noticed, and in The Unshakable Woman, I mentioned the 4. And I would love to talk about the PhD study that I just did, which found a whole new bunch of things. But what I recognized in healing from a life crisis, and and in the life crisis that I was specifically referring to in the book, it was physical, mental, emotional. And I found in the women that I've worked with, thousands of women over the last 27 years, they really fall within these 4 categories. And the first is, it's a willingness to grow and change. I mean, think about it. If you're unwilling to do anything differently, well, how the heck can you expect anything different to show up? So, a crisis happened, and it creates for us that psychological earthquake where now it's like life before it happened and life after it happened. And now that we're in this new space, we really have to be willing to look at things and think of things and be willing to do things differently, or we can't really expect much change. So that was the first one. The second one is support. This is so crucial. And whether this means support from the right coaches, healers, therapists, doctors, friends, someone who's been there and who can help you. I think because we're so strong, we think we can do it all on our own, and we're not supposed to. We're supposed to have support. So that's a big one too. Mindset is huge. If you go into a crisis helpless and hopeless, well, lacking that grit, that resilience, that determination, it's going to be that much harder to heal.
Sure.
Then if you go in with this, like, okay, this stinks, but let's go. And then health. Think about it from a health standpoint. If you go in to a health challenge with poor health, it's just that much harder. I was in, just not even that long ago, full-blown adrenal fatigue. And, and we also tested me, and I was insulin resistant and borderline diabetic. I don't even eat sugar. So imagine if I did. If I had this awful diet, I would have been a diabetic. So going into a health challenge, already having somewhat as best health as you can, it's that much better. And then from a mental and emotional standpoint, having your health. If you go into, let's say you're going through a divorce and you feel awful about the way your body or the way you feel, you look, that much harder. You've been emotionally slammed already. It's that much harder. So health is a big one too.
I love that you say that, because so many people, I think, especially when they're when they're already in trauma, of course, and they say, I can't deal with that right now. I can't focus on that. But beforehand, the people that say, I'll get healthy when, and they put it off and they say, when this happens, or when I'm out of debt, or when I finish school, and your perspective of reminding them how much easier any obstacle and reaching any finish line is when you go through it already in a state of as optimal health as you can be at the time. It gives them permission if they're not willing to give themselves permission. And maybe that helps them to realize and have that push.
I found for years it was, okay, well, get back into your skinny jeans and lose the baby weight and all, that's all wonderful. But what it serves, being healthy has such a greater purpose. Who does it allow you to become? What does it allow you to do? How does it allow you to show up? I was at a conference recently and it was 1,200 women, and they said, "Oh, Debbie, by the way, we're going to have 2 jumbotrons." So of course my first, so everybody can see you. So of course my first thought was, "Oh my gosh, is everything jumboed?" And then of course I thought, well, you only have 100% of your energy at any given time. And if even 20% of that was thinking about, are they looking at this? Or they, is this out of showing too big or whatever it was, I would only have 80% left to serve. That's not fair. Then I'm not conveying my message right, the way I want to anyway. So for no other reason than to show up powerfully.
Oh, I love that.
Just helps. Mm-hmm.
Now, you talk about post-traumatic growth, and I know that has to do with your PhD pursuits, and I would love for you to talk about all of this.
Sure. Well, I'd like to share what post-traumatic growth is and then how it led to my study. Resilience and post-traumatic growth are so different. Resilience is sort of a bouncing back, a bringing back to. Post-traumatic growth is a rebuilding after everything has been destroyed. And I'll use this example of a house because it's really easy to understand from this perspective. Let's say you have a house And your house needs a new paint job. You paint the house. That's resilience. Your house needs a new boiler. You get a new boiler. That's resilience. You need a new roof. You get a new roof. That's resilience. Post-traumatic growth is a tornado comes by and levels your house. Now, you have every right in the world to say, oh my gosh, this is the most awful, terrible thing that's ever happened. But should you choose to rebuild the house, you don't have to do anything. If you choose to rebuild the house, now you've been there and back. Why not make it a little nicer? Why not give it what the old house didn't have? Now that you have it expanded awareness, why not make it bigger if that's what you like? Why not have, everything that the old house didn't include? There's no more foundation. So you can create anything. So it really is creating this entirely new life. And the study that you just mentioned was, so I'm finishing up, it's this PhD in transpersonal psychology, which is the psychology of transformation and human potential. I was absolutely obsessed with transformation. And it was time to do a study. And I've had some experiences with betrayal. So the study was on women who've been betrayed by a family member, a partner, who have or haven't experienced this post-traumatic growth, which is what we just talked about. And I did this study, and what was so amazing, we had two discoveries which were made. One was every single woman, regardless of her timeline, it was different for everybody, went through 5 stages from the shock, even before the shock of betrayal, to the moment they experienced and they considered themselves healed. That was the first thing. So there is a predictable process now that you can go through. And I remember going into this saying, my gosh, we've heard of the stages of grief. I would so love it if there were stages of transformation after betrayal. Well, sure enough, that's what happened. The second thing was, I had a feeling that healing from betrayal was very different than healing from death of a loved one, a natural disaster, a disease, because I had been through those and it felt different to me, but I didn't want to assume it. We included it in the study. And sure enough, every single one of my participants said, oh my gosh, it's so different. There are so many other elements of yourself that you need to heal after healing from betrayal. So it needed a new term. So that term is called post-betrayal transformation.
That is really exciting. And you saw this consistency that everybody needed to go through all the layers and the steps.
Every single one. And what was so amazing was they all went through the stages, but at their own, in their own timeline, choosing their own resources, but based on what they had available to them and what they chose to do with it. There were, let's say, levels of extreme, but they all, and now there is a 5-stage process. And we just opened PBTinstitute.com, the site, and the PBT Institute, which is a center on Long Island. It's now there's going to be all kinds of teaching and training, and because now we know exactly what women experience along every one of those 5 stages.
Wow, I hope that we can have you back on in the future and talk more about that and how it's going. And
Sure,
we'd love to get more into that with you.
I'd love to.
Now, I have a question. Your list of revealing questions that you have in the book. It felt so crucial and indispensable when I was reading it. It seemed a no-brainer. You'd read the list and say, of course, I would need to know these things. But when you're in the thick of a trauma and trying to heal from a crisis, it's not always so obvious how you navigate out of that. But at the same time, these questions are they're so real and they're so granular, and really you can't really hide from them. When you look at those questions, they really bring you up short. How do you help people to push through this list? Because I'm guessing that the people that read that list that are actually needing the healing at the time they're reading the book might want to run screaming.
You're so right. And here's the first clue. If you don't want to answer the questions, that's how you know you need to.
That's it.
That's absolutely how you know you need to. And we think we want change. We don't want change. Change is scary. It creates a shakeup with everyone around us. So, that was what I was talking about before. That's why we'll do everything we can to avoid it. These questions are designed to show you what you're running from.
Wow.
And to sort of put it in your face, what is life good? And I'm happy to share the questions if you want.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you
Sure.
don't mind, I mean, that would be great.
Yeah, oh sure. So the first is, what, am I numbing and distracting myself?
Mhm.
Right? If so, how? Are you may realize, oh my gosh, I'm keeping myself so busy that I can't even think. Or, you know what? I realize every time I walk into a room, I have to put that TV on. What's that about?
Yeah.
Or what's with this binge every day at 8, 9 o'clock? What's up with that? So really ask yourself, am I numbing and distracting myself? If so, how? Now here's the big question. You ready? This is the loaded one. What am I pretending not to see? Ooh, are you pretending not to know about, you don't see that health issue that needs your attention? Are you pretending that you don't see your relationship is in trouble? Are you pretending to see that this job is not nearly as rewarding and fulfilling as you originally thought it was going to be? What are you pretending not to see? And then the next one, how's life going to look in 5 to 10 years if you do nothing? So imagine now, you know it's a health issue. You ignore it for 5 more years. What's going to happen?
It's going to get much worse.
Of course. You have a relationship issue. You ignore it for 5 to 10 years. What's going to happen? You have this issue with your job. 5 to 10 years. What's going to happen? Right. So really take a look at that. And then if I do something about this, if I make this change, what could life look like in 5 to 10 years? So yes, it may be very uncomfortable now. It may be very sticky, awkward, ugly. But what can life look like if now you take a look and say, okay, you know what, let me just deal with this health issue. Or, you know what, it's time to look at this relationship. Or, okay, here we go. I have to really deal with this job. That's transformation right there. And, but what happens is when we see these things, we've created this cascade of events, because the first thing is now we're going to start asking ourselves a ton of questions. Let's say it's a job. What do I do about this job? This is all this is what I've done. This is what I know. Now I have to get a resume together. Now I have to get clothes for interviews, whatever it is. And then from there, you start asking yourself more questions like, well, what do I do about childcare? What do I do about this? What do I do about that? And then of course, with that comes lots of fear. So this is why we distract. It's too big until we can.
And there was another one on there that I thought was really powerful. It was, I believe it was, what am I avoiding to keep the peace?
That's a big one. If I tell you how many times I have sat with someone in my office and they just keep things as they are because they avoid the shakeup. But here's what happens. Over time, that creates a lot of resentment.
Yeah.
So you're really choosing your evil. You're saying, okay, well, I'm keeping the peace at my own expense. And over time, there's resentment, and then that's going to eat away at the relationship. So you're paying a price for what you're doing, for sure.
Now, you emphasize part of the healing process, the importance of writing and not typing, though.
Yeah.
So you're talking about writing by hand.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us why writing by hand creates a different experience than typing, especially in these, technological days where everyone's got texting and messaging.
You really, you access a different part of your brain when you just take that pen to paper. And, what you're doing is, and the whole idea is you're, especially when it comes to something like trauma, you're creating what's called a coherent narrative. And whether it's literally or figuratively, where you're creating a story. Now, because unless we do that, it's our trauma becomes our story. Our whole story. It's our life story, instead of just becoming a chapter in our story. And what the writing allows is that perspective to just evolve. So you see what it's done for you, and so often you see the benefit of it. And I know that sounds crazy. When you say, well, what's the benefit of this trauma? When you're on the other side, it's so easy to see. I mean, if I tell you how many clients I have, I mean, of course, not going through it, but now they're grateful they lost their job because now they're doing the work they love, or they're grateful that relationship ended because now they're with their soulmate, or they're grateful they got that disease because now they have a love and appreciation for life they never would have had. But you don't see it when you're going through it, but that writing helps.
Now you talk about our in discussing ways to get in touch with your feelings and what you need to do next and decisions, you talk about the writing, but also something called our internal GPS. And you also talk about how a lot of people, that we really all on some level have this, but people, whether or not they're aware of it, so even some people that might be aware of this feeling that something's wrong, as you said, they don't use the GPS. Maybe they run the other way. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Sure. There is this voice that's guiding us all the time. We don't trust it and we don't strengthen it. But if you look back, you'll find that every time you listened, it steered you right. Every time you didn't, it came back to bite you. Now, it's the kind of thing where even if you didn't listen and it was a massive, colossal failure, mistake, it's not, because nothing puts you on the right track faster. But that internal GPS is conspiring in your favor, is there to support you. And I'll tell you, I have learned throughout the years, the more I trust it, the more I let it guide me, the better off I am. Every single thing I'm doing now has been the direct result of listening to that internal GPS. Like here I am, I've had a home-based business for 27 years. And now the first time I'm opening up a physical center, and it was all intuitively guided. And even just doing this study, all intuitively guided. All of it.
Well, I love that, because there's so much talk these days about operating out of our prefrontal cortex and removing emotion from situations, utilizing our analytical, rational brains. And your instruction reminds me more of Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, in recommending that we bypass our logical, analytical mind to get to the heart of change and what's important. So how can we do this? And why is it helpful to bypass the analytical?
It absolutely serves us. It's wonderful, that analytical mind, but what you really need to know can never be found there. And the tools that we use through the analytical, like let's just say your analytical mind is the hammer, but what you need to use is the screwdriver. You will never, ever, ever, ever find the screwdriver through your analytical mind. And if the screwdriver is the tool you need, it just can't be accessed through that. So we need to bypass it, because no matter what you outwardly say, you may say, I'm ready for this, I want this, and it doesn't make the bit of difference. It's your subconscious is driving every single thing you think, you say, you do, you believe. And until you access that, you're just not getting to the heart of it at all.
And how do we access that?
Meditation and journaling. I found meditation and journaling to be the best ways to access it. Like for me personally, and maybe a lot of listeners will find this, I have always this sort of running to-do list in my brain. So for me, the best way to access that analytical, the subconscious mind, to bypass that analytical mind, is to do something that for me feels like it's an analytical process. So I'll write, because to me, the thought of, well, I'll just sit there and meditate. I've had some amazing experiences, but my analytical mind will say, oh, that's just too flighty. No, write something. So, because that's something that's tangible and physical. But the downloads I've had through that process, I'll write things and then I look at it and think, oh my gosh, I had no idea I even felt that. Just absolutely profound. That never would have happened had I not do that. So those are the two that I found, for me personally anyway, just by far the greatest ways to bypass that analytical mind.
So that really helps you lead to some breakthroughs.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so funny because, I'm so goal oriented. So sometimes it's really, I don't get much of anything. And then I feel like like so defeated, like, I didn't accomplish, anything. But when it is that just that unbelievable download, it's just, and I know it is, because I'm writing in a way that I don't normally write. I'm using words I don't normally use.
Do you write after meditation, or do you do the whole thing at once, sort of just a brain dump or automatic writing type practice?
Sometimes it's really a combination. Sometimes I'll just meditate. Sometimes I'll just journal. Sometimes I'll do both. But I've found that when I go into it with no expectation and sometimes leading with a question, it really, really helps me. I'll just ask, it could be anything as general as, what do I need to know? What do I need to know today? And I know it becomes sort of downloaded when, like I said, it's not even my voice. It's not even how I speak. I'm like, whoa, this is something I'm paying attention to.
And I think probably that the more often you practice this, the better you get at telling the difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've done it so long now that sometimes I'll say, as I'm writing, like, I need to. And then all of a sudden it changes to you. You need, and I'm like, ooh, who's saying that? But then I get so excited and I pull myself right out of it.
Yeah, step right out of it.
Right.
Now you have an analogy that I absolutely love. It's the analogy of the trapeze. And I believe that was part of the book where you were talking about changing your beliefs, or is it forgiveness? It was a very integral shift that people were trying to make. And you said there's the analogy of the trapeze. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Think of what goes on with a trapeze. Here you are, you're up in the air. It's so scary. You're all the way up there. And now you're about to absolutely let go of a bar and grab onto another. Now you cannot get onto that next bar until you're willing to let go of the one you've been on. Because think about it. If you have one hand on either bar, you're really not going anywhere. You have to be willing. And that willingness can be terrifying, and we'll stay stuck unless we're willing to let go of one. And you brought up forgiveness, and there's so much to that, because forgiveness can be so terrifying. I found with my clients, and especially when it comes to healing from trauma, especially something like healing from something like betrayal, forgiveness is a massive piece of that. And one of the reasons why I believe, anyway, that it's so challenging, because it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Everything in our logical, rational mind says, but they did this wrong. This wasn't correct. This wasn't right. This wasn't, according to my rules, this doesn't work. And forgiveness says, yeah, that's true, and do it anyway. So it has nothing to do with everything that's in your mind, what it's telling you.
People don't want to let go of that validation that they're right and that this is so unjust.
And I'm sure it is. And if you told anybody your story, they would agree. And the difference is, when we look at it as we're forgiving somebody for anything else other than for ourselves and for our own health and wellness and moving on, that's where we really need to take a look at it, because it's not about them. It's really about us. It's letting go of the power that pain has over us. I remember doing a lot of research for the dissertation about how physically the body responds when we hang on to a grudge, and when we forgive, how the body heals. It's profound. But I also thought, with something like forgiveness, it's this one big grand ta-da moment. And I was so disappointed, because it never really worked that way with me. And what I learned was, it really happens in layers and stages, and it's okay. It's really okay.